everyone. This is Ian,
Hey, it's Paul.
and you are on now episode what? 9? Is it 9?
8. This is
8.
8, I believe. Yes,
See,
episode
I'm
8.
glad. I'm glad you can keep me on track. So this is episode 8 of the Surviving Central City podcast. Before we get started, just want to remind everybody to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, etc. You can look up Surviving Central City, and you should come across that. And yes, I'm calling it Twitter. So I'm
Forever,
gonna,
yeah.
yeah, forever. I'm gonna continue to call it Twitter. You know what I find funny is every time because I'm lazy and I don't bookmark anything. So every time I go to Twitter, because I don't have the app because Elon Musk. So I go to Google and I type Twitter and it takes me to www.twitter.com. Then it redirects X. So,
I was going to say,
whatever.
didn't it just change? I think that's just recent, the change to X.com. I'm pretty sure.
It's so lame. I hate that name. I don't know why that dude is obsessed with the letter X, but
Yeah, I don't either. I have no idea, actually.
I'm not gonna. I have theories, but none
Yeah.
of them are appropriate for this venue. So I'm gonna throw it over to Paul so that he can talk about what this episode's about, because this episode is going to be very Paul centric, and I'm just going to be sitting back eating popcorn. So
Oh,
Paul, if
yeah,
you
that's
want to
cool.
kind
That's
of
cool.
give an
Hold on, let
overview of
me
what we're
put the
talking about.
backpack on. The load
Yeah,
of the podcast is on my back. No, I'm
carry
just
the
kidding.
group.
So I guess I'll tee it up, and then we're gonna kind of, I think, go backwards and talk a little bit about what's just been going on in our personal lives a little bit. But um, we're going to talk today about public alert and warning, and I guess for the most part, I think this audience is, based on what we see, should know what I mean when I say public alert and warning. But for those that may straggle through to this podcast, or somehow you found us because of our endless promotions on our personal Facebook and X pages out there, this is a topic that I deal with pretty much every day in what I do for a living, and have done actually for the most part, my entire career in the field of emergency management. And I think, Ian, you've dabbled in this world as well in a previous role when you were, with Fairfax County OEM. But public alert and warning is a concept of disseminating information to just the public. And when I say the public, it could mean lots of different things, but for the most part, the residents that live in your jurisdiction, visitors or travelers that may be coming through an area that you have authority over or jurisdiction over. But could also be, more of an internal employee. If you're a business, maybe it's your workers, your coworkers. If you're a county like we've worked in Virginia, maybe it's the county employees that come to work every day in different divisions and things like that. So there's this concept of needing to communicate effectively and efficiently, and accurately and timely, with these people when something happens. And it could be, sometimes this isn't always an emergency type message. It could be just information, like you just might want to convey something is going to happen. You want people to be aware of a road closure or a special event that's occurring, or something that may be out of the norm for their particular day. Or it could be something more emergent, like, hey, this is an event that has occurred that we need you to take action on, or we want you to avoid a particular area, or we need you to evacuate. We want you to just pay attention because of the event that may be occurring, and you may have to take protective measures due to this event. Weather might be a good example, or something like that. So it's a very, very broad topic. There are lots of different concepts, mechanisms for which this occurs across many different spectrums. And so we'll dabble in a whole bunch of them, I think, today as we kind of go through a conversation. And I'll certainly keep it at a fairly high level. There's a lot of also, I think, opinion. I'll talk about that a little bit too. I think there's a lot of opinion on how to best, or most effectively send these types of communications to the public and to your internal employees, or to the just people in general, and like where that comes from and how that's put together. But at a high level, at least, that's what we're gonna kind of jump into today. So, but before we do that, I think we wanted to kind of sync up and say, hey, what's going on with you? How you been? What you been up to? I know, I feel like I haven't talked to you directly in at least a week, which is unusual, I would say, for us. We usually check in every couple days or so. But what have you been up to, Mr. Ian?
Um,
As my
yeah,
kids call you.
yeah,
My
Mr.
kids call
Ian.
you Mr.
I'll take it. Yeah, just we got. There's a special event in another jurisdiction that prior to starting, I was working on the incident action plan for that on behalf of our team. I'm kind of filling in as a resources unit for that. Other than that, just work. Just yeah, the typical stuff. The spring is, as you know, it's always a struggle because of the pool and the fruit trees and the blah blah.
Oh
Blah.
yes.
So
Yes.
there's a plus this year. I mean, there's just like, one thing, just like everybody else. There's one thing after another breaking. I think
Yeah.
I had told you. I don't know if I mentioned it. We had to buy like some massive AC unit to replace the one that had broken that was like 15 years old.
Yep.
And so the other day I walked into the bathroom. There's freaking ants everywhere, and I'm like, this is
Uh,
the bathroom. There's no, like, what are ants doing? You know what I mean? So I
right.
ended up chasing it down outside, finding where they were coming from. You know what I mean? But it's just like these little
Yeah.
things.
The hairy
Just-
homeowner stuff that you got
yeah,
to do.
it just pops up constantly. And there's
Trust
like
me, I understand.
there's no end. I've got a Google task thing that's got like 53 things on it for me to do, and I'm just like, which one do I want to do today? And just trying to check off the boxes. So it's just
Yeah.
it's a nightmare between that and work and counting down my days till retirement, which is a daily activity that I enjoy very much.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I
so
meant to.
yeah.
I should check. When I was in before I moved from Dems to my current role within Everbridge. I had created, for those that know what WebUC is, I had created a custom WebUC board that was just a countdown. It was like a timer. It was supposed to be like a countdown toward events, like a hurricane's going to approach. You put in like how far off it is, and it would count down to the hurricane impact. But I put in there Paul's retirement as the initial countdown, and I never got rid of it. I left it there, and so it's, as far as I know, it's still counting down. And I think when I put it there, I had like something. It only counted like in days, so it was something like 2,000, actually it was probably more than that. It was like 20,000 or something days. I can't remember, but yeah, I should check and see if that's still. If anyone's in Fairfax hears this, hit us up on X and let us know if it's still there and what the count is. I'm curious.
I looked this morning. I've got probably too much information for a lot of people, but if we like with my jurisdiction, if you don't use annual leave, you have a cap and it converts to sick leave, and then that sick leave can count towards your retirement.
Right.
So I'm like not touching any annual, and I'm just watching every year that number tick down. So right now it's May 2030, and I'm looking at that. I've been with the county 23 and a half years, and I'm looking at that and going, am I going to live that long? It seems like it's only like five and some change, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say
man,
it's like 6 years, but roughly. I mean,
it feels brutal though when I look at it. It's like, how am I going to survive this amount of time? It's just, Yeah.
my daughter Ellie graduated from high school that same year,
Yeah.
so there you go. It's okay.
Yeah, it's crazy though. Like my son is now 3.5, and he's just hit where he just woke up one day and said, you know what, I'm potty trained.
Nice.
Like
That's
just
good.
one day, like just done.
Yeah.
So, and I'm looking at that and going, well, that was 3.5 years ago, and it feels like it was last week.
Yeah.
That he was born. So I don't know. Every time I think about that date, it just seems more and more brutal. But
Yeah, time, man. It just undefeated. It never stops. So,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. We've been running around like crazy because my son he finished middle school. So, and in Virginia here, we're almost out. My kids are almost out of school. Like this coming week is their last week. So actually, when this comes out, probably the week we're in is their final week of school, and it's insane to me how fast that school year goes by. But yeah, my son is moving up from middle school to high school, so that was a huge deal. His ceremony for that was this past Friday, and he was doing track, so we had a whole bunch of track awards and stuff like that. It was just a really cool last week and a half or so with him, and kind of seeing him move on and grow up. It's like you said, it's just insane to think about. And same thing, I can remember, back when he was only like 2 or 3, and it seems like sometimes it was only a couple days ago, but it's crazy. So anyway, that's super sentimental.
You said something a minute ago about how we are shamelessly promoting the podcast on Facebook, which I of course I'm not doing. I log into Facebook like once every 3 months.
See what's up and then go out
for a variety of reasons. But yesterday morning, like picked up my phone and I was like groggy and I was just like swiping through stuff before I got out of bed. I ended up coming across a guy I was in the military with, his profile, and it was like, see what's going on with this guy. You know how they try to keep you looking at, whatever.
Right.
So
Right.
I was like, who is that in his picture? And I pulled it up, and he has like a beard similar to mine, but it's Santa Claus gray.
No
And I was
kidding.
like, and he's the same age. He may even be younger than me. And I was just like, oh, this is it for today. This is my highlight. Like this is the best. This is the best my day is gonna get.
Mhm.
Just relish this for about 5 minutes.
Right.
Because every
Right.
time I feel old, I saw that, and I was like, man, okay, I'm doing
Doing
all
all
right.
right.
I'm doing all right for the moment.
So
Yeah.
you'll be fine. You'll be alive and kicking in 5 years. No problem. 6
Yeah, we'll
years.
see. We'll see. I'm sure I'll have a lot more gray by then, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. All right. So, public alert and warning. And I guess I'll put this disclosure up front. So, I work now for a company that develops software for this purpose, which I won't talk about. Actually, I'm going to avoid software altogether in this conversation for obvious reasons, and just talk kind of about the space and our experiences with it, and a little bit about the high level components of public alert and warning that apply really to any jurisdiction software system, would matter not what application you're using to do this. But the key point here is that there is a need for these things to function, for a software application to exist, that you would have to implement. In general, at least, there's something that needs to give access for your jurisdiction to some of these components, but also to provide a space or platform for folks to register, as we'll talk about, or sign up for these kinds of alerts. So what kinds of types of alerts are there in the public alert and warning space? And we usually break this up into, or at least in my experience, we kind of always break this up into these different categories. There's two big categories. There's your what we call opt-ins, or those that are kind of based or derived on people signing up to receive alerts. So they choose to do this, like you're promoting an alert system that you want your residents, let's say, to sign up for. You probably brand it around something that's catchy, so that it's easy to promote and market to the public. And the concept there is, residents sign up for it on their own. They provide a lot of information, or different ways that they can be contacted, and they can choose what types of alerts they typically want to receive. And those opt-in type of alerts are typically, lower severity type of alerts. They might be informational. There might be some around like crime alerts, or the parks are closing type of alerts, or activities that are going on within your jurisdiction. Traffic is a good one. Weather usually falls into this category in a lot of ways. And so people kind of choose to pick these categories and what they want to get. But because of the very nature of them signing up for your system, they have the ability to be reached for things that maybe are emergent, things that are occurring where you need to communicate some information to them, whether they chose it or not in your site, your platform, whatever you're using. So there's this opt-in concept of people go out, find, or you promote, hey, go sign up for our alert system so that you can know what's going on in your city, your county, or wherever, your town, and they do that. And then there's the other concept of opt-out, in which the public didn't choose to sign up for this system or choose to receive these alerts. They get them automatically just by being within your jurisdiction, and having and in most cases, access to a communication device of some kind, a cell phone, or the television, the radio, traditional FM AM radio, things like that, where they're just kind of in the area. They didn't choose any kind of emergency notification system. They didn't sign up for anything, and they have to opt out of that system. So they're automatically kind of put into it or receive it just based on having some sort of equipment, and they have to choose to opt out of it. And so we'll kind of talk about those two, I think, things in a little bit more detail as we go down, how this all really kind of works and what the different components are. But does that make sense to you, Ian? Like, there's the I chose to sign up for this kind of concept, and then there's the why the hell did I get this? I want out of it kind of.
Yeah, and those are the ones I get. So
Yeah.
those are the ones that I get constantly for I, the software we use. There's a bunch of, I'll say, stuff linked together. Everybody has kind of their own little area they operate in. But I get messages from other jurisdictions about things. I'm like, why am I getting this? How do I shut this off? It's just the most irritating thing ever. So yeah, I mean, it's
Yes,
I
that's
don't
a good point.
I don't like texts. They don't make me feel special. They don't make me feel like somebody misses me. I hate them. I don't
Right.
want to be bothered.
Right.
So when I get these texts about something going on, and I'm just going to pull this out of thin air. Let's say in DC.
Yeah.
Let's say that I'm getting messages about something going on in DC. Like, I don't care. I still don't understand. I've looked 100 times. I don't understand why I'm getting these, how I'm getting these, and it literally just makes. Luckily, I'm not like full-blooded Karen, where I'm going to call and start screaming at somebody. But there's been times where I'm just like, yeah, I definitely care about this water main break, on Saturday morning in DC or whatever.
Right. When I have nowhere near it, don't care about it.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and as somebody who used to work, and I know you're familiar with this as well, which you may talk about later. Somebody who used to work doing tech support and answering customer service complaints about the messages that go out. At that time, when the system was much less automated, people could select what they wanted, what they didn't want, etc. There wasn't as much automatically opting in, I'll say, or people who are automatically opted in, and I would get cussed at daily in an email from somebody who was just irate that we had the nerve to tell them that they selected that they wanted to be notified about traffic, so they get a message about traffic, but it's 30 miles from them.
Right.
You would have thought that was the end of the world. Like, this was the biggest inconvenience they could have possibly ever received or possibly ever experienced, that, they found out that there was a fatal accident 30 miles from them, and they're like, oh, can you not narrow this down more so that it only affects the 4 stop signs near my house?
Right. Yeah, because we track you real time, and we know exactly where you're going and where you're going to be. Yeah, I used to get into those too.
Yeah, we're going to cater everything to you specifically, Karen. So,
Right.
Yeah,
there's still a whole lot of that that exists out there in the public. And as you can imagine, just in general, when you I would say, quote unquote, bother the public in any way, well, I mean, it could literally. We used to joke. There could be a meteor crashing through the atmosphere, and we could send a public alert to all impacted people about this meteor is going to crash to the Earth, and somebody would complain that they got that alert. It woke them up, and God forbid they got woken up.
And the other half would be complaining it's a government conspircy, and 5 caused the meteor.
It's it. We're not. It's just it's always a lose-lose in a lot of cases for those that are sending. And I mean, at least that's my personal. That's how I've experienced it. Probably, just based on what we've done. Maybe a little biased, but it's never. It's hard to be a win-win on that side. You'll get a few like, oh, I really appreciated that message, or I took action and it worked, or hey, we sent out an alert about a missing person, and somebody got that alert and then they found the person. Those are like some of the biggest wins I've ever seen. But so they do exist, but it's a lot of it is complaints. Yeah, a lot of it's complaining.
I used to do yearly at the end of each year. I'd do like pivot tables and show how many people new subscriptions versus people that left because they were angry or whatever.
Yes.
And it always went up. You know what I mean? So
yes.
like I guess if you're looking at it from like a corporate standpoint, or if I was looking at it like that, it's like, we're growing. Screw these people.
It's a net gain almost always.
Right.
Yeah. Across the spectrum, I think that's always the case. Yeah.
What you were talking about is funny, though, and I know I don't want to steal any of your later thunder because I see some stuff on the agenda, and I'm sure you'll venture into this, but you were talking about, getting a message about a missing person. It's hilarious to me, hilarious in a good way, but it's funny to me that, like, every time I get an Amber Alert thing, I know that every single person that gets those is like, I'm going to be the one who finds this dude. I think everybody has that same thought. Start looking at license plates and oh, dude, it's amazing. And even again, I don't want to steal your thunder, but if you go back to like the DC sniper thing in like 03, that would have been a prime opportunity to use that system, which I know you're going to talk about, but like the Amber Alert type system, to get that information out as quickly as possible. So like it just makes you wonder how much the technology we have now would have impacted some
prior events.
Prior events, prior incidents. And I'll shut up on that because, like I said, I think you're going to venture into that momentarily. So.
Yeah, we're going to definitely talk about it. And I think that's a good point, though, that the technology continues to change constantly. And how we interface with the public changes, maybe not as constantly, but it definitely evolves over time. And it has evolved since since you and I got into this space originally to today, it's a much different world in which we live in general, and where the public is kind of interfacing with information is completely different in a lot of ways. And so you have to always, the concept of trying to meet people where they are is a huge component of public alert and warning, and trying to ensure that you're doing the things and reaching those people where they are where they're going for information, and not trying to just rely on what you maybe did 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And I think a lot of us in the especially in the local government space struggle with that. It's change is hard for a lot of government in general, and that's always something that is difficult, is to kind of think outside the box where you're going to reach people. So if you're listening to this and you are in local government, public alert warning, always think about that. How am I getting to the people, and is there a better way?
And stop sending me messages.
And stop sending me alerts. I didn't sign up for it, I swear. I have like 8 accounts, just didn't even use my real name. I love it. I just trying to find somebody is to unsubscribe them is impossible. So yeah, we talked about this. So this opt-in, opt-out concept, and inside of that, kind of in a more granular level, opt-ins are typically managed by the local jurisdiction or the states, or a private entity like a corporation, and they are typically really just a database of contacts and information. The contact itself and how you're going to contact them by email, by cell phone, text messaging, whatever, and what kinds of alerts you need to send them. Maybe you divide them up into buckets depending on who they are or what they do. If they're in the internal side, if they're in the public side, it might be based on location, where they live, and you can generate alerts to those individuals based on those filters, if you will, or categories that you can create within inside of a system. The opt-outs are typically databases of people that are provided, and a lot of people probably don't realize this, especially if you're not in the space, but there is access to public information that isn't publicly available, if that doesn't conflict, right? Like a person's home phone, if they still have one of those ancient landline phones, but it's unlisted. It's an unlisted number. They didn't want it in the phone book, even if you even know what that is. And there are ways to get that data. Especially if you're a public entity. In this case, if you're a public safety entity, and you want to be able to provide emergency information to these people, there is a way to get that data through the 911 system.
Are you implying that our data is for sale?
Yes, it is for sale. Your data is always for sale, right? So it just depends on who's buying. In this case, if I have a public safety interest or need, then I have the ability to procure, and nothing's free, right? So it is a procurement. Typically, it's to procure your emergency data. In this case, your home phone that you didn't want anybody to know about, right? So if you ever get a phone call on your house phone that you've maintained for 100 years, and you just like, nobody should know this number. How did they get my number? That's how, right? They purchased it through the phone company based on an exemption for being a public safety entity and having the ability to do so. The other, probably the most well-known one today, is something called iPAWS, which is managed and implemented by FEMA. So iPAWS is an acronym. It's Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, if I'm correct. I think that's right. And it allows a public safety entity who has gone through a vetting process with FEMA to access this network, which allows them to send alerts to your cell phone without you ever signing up for their alert system. It's actually not even based on a particular alerting system at all. It's simply based on the fact that you have a cell phone that was manufactured after a certain date. I want to say it's like around 2007 time frame. So if your phone's newer than 2007, and it was manufactured with a specific computer chip in it that communicates with cell phone towers across the U.S., that will receive these types of alerts without any kind of opt-in at all. Just the fact that you bought the phone is what would opted you into this particular system. And it's based on location. So I simply draw a shape on a map and send the alert. And if it goes out to this FEMA iPAWS network, it goes down to all cell phone towers in this particular area I selected on my map in my software, and it will communicate with any cell phones that are in range of that cell phone tower. That's a very high level. There's a lot more detail to that, I understand. But at a high level, that's how it works. So the cool thing about this is you don't need to sign up for it, and you don't even have to be from the area that's sending the alert. If you're a visitor or if you're a traveler or tourist and you happen to be visiting this particular area and an event occurs and they send out an iPAWS message and you're within the range of a cell phone tower, you're going to get the message. Now I say that you can technically, I never would advise it, but you could technically as a person in the public go into the settings of your phone and opt out. You can opt out of these alerts for the most part. There is one category within this system that you can't ever opt out of, which is a presidential alert. So if Biden wants to send you a message, you'll get it no matter what you do with your phone. You're going to get it. That's actually one of the purposes of building such a system in the first place, was to allow for a presidential message to the public based on some extremely impactful events, right?
Like your meteor that you were talking about.
Like meteor, right? A nuclear holocaust, something like crazy like that, right? So it is a extremely valuable tool to the public to public safety. It's probably the most hated alerting system from the public's perspective because of the like you were saying, like I get this alert and I don't know where it came from and why did I get it, and how did they how did they find me here or whatever, because of the nature of how it works. I mean, there's no need to sign up for it, but
Can I tell you a story about the presidential alert thing?
yeah.
So back when before iPAWS was a thing, they were going around doing like focus groups and going around interviewing people and talking to administrators of these different alerting networks about iPAWS. And like, well, what do you think would be valuable? And what about this? And what about that? And of course, I was in charge of the alerting system for Fairfax at the time. So I guess they thought I was going to be supportive of the idea, and very quickly ran into the reality that I was like just bashing everything they said.
Yeah.
But the presidential alerts, I remember specifically, they were like, oh yeah, well, it's going to be great. One of the features that we're going to add in is the ability for the president, if there's an incident in your area, the president can communicate directly with the public. And I'm like, you realize that goes against everything NIMS. Right? Like the National Incident Management System, like you guys have told us we're adopting this policy, all incidents are local, the message comes from the locals. What if what the president said is conflicting with what the locals want?
Right.
What are you guys doing? Like that was basically, and they were just like,
well, who invited this guy?
Yeah, exactly. They were just like, that's not really our lane, dude. Like we're just here to make the text messages go, what I mean?
Right.
But I remember I just like I don't want to say I lost it. That's overstating it. But I remember just being like, why is this a good idea? Can you explain to me why this is a good idea?
Right.
Why wouldn't the locals be sending this? And then
Right.
you guys amplifying it or whatever, and it was hilarious because the people I was talking to were geeks. Like they were not like, they had no knowledge of anything emergency management related. They were just
they were the
literally,
tech. They're just making it work.
They were just the techies, man. And I remember their faces and I was like, oh, got them. It was awesome. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I always think of it like this. If you're getting a presidential alert, it's probably telling you it's over. Right? Like at that scale, if you're sending an alert to the entire country at one time, the event is something we've probably never dealt with in our lifetimes. Maybe it's something that has occurred previous, but
as our politicians get less and less responsible in general,
Right,
there's no telling where that's going to go. So.
Well, then that brings up a great point, which is responsibility, right? So, like, if you are a public safety entity and you have gone through this vetting process and you have access to send what we would call a wireless emergency alert or a WEA to cell phones that have not opted in for this, right? They just happen to be in the area that you are alerting for some particular piece of information. You have a responsibility to make sure that it is of a nature that makes sense to send to these people in this way, right? In other words, you shouldn't necessarily send a traffic alert out through the wireless emergency alert system to an entire county, right? That would be crazy, you would think, right? Every single person in the county would get this alert, and they would look at it and be like, "What? Like, why am I getting this? Right? Like it's a traffic alert. Why do I need to know about this and who sent it to me? Right? Like, hopefully, at least they in the message put in who sent it to them, but like they probably are questioning like, what is this for? And so there's a responsibility there of the jurisdictions to kind of ensure that they use the system in a way that is beneficial and it makes sense for the public. So, and there's a lot to that, and there is, there are checks. There are some checks and balances, and how that works, and access to the system can technically be taken away, and uh, you can't just gain access to. You got to kind of vet who you are and that you've taken certain training and that kind of stuff. Not necessarily enough to ensure that these errant messages don't go out, because they do. If you ever want to get a good chuckle, if there's a website, actually, it's if you just Google PBS Warn, PBSWARN. There's a website. It's just a map, and it shows real time all the active wireless emergency alerts that are out in the country. And you can go through and see what's out there, and some of the stuff will make you shake your head, like, what the heck are they thinking? Like, what did they do? Why? And some people make it, actually, I don't say a career, but some people certainly make it a hobby of monitoring that website and then tweeting out their evaluation of said messages to the public, right? Like, look at this message. This is why it sucked.
That's what I'm going to do when I retire. I'm just going to sit
yeah.
on this website and just tweet.
I can see that being something you would certainly do.
Just unleash the fury.
Here's another fool
on Twitter.
Yeah. So just keep in mind too, and it's so there's some pressure there, like some at least peer pressure there on when you're going to click send on these particular types of words, like for WIA, to do it right, because there are people. Everyone sees it. The whole country sees it. So right, like. There is no hiding what you did, or like it's definitely a very public venture when you do these types of at that scale, these types of alerts. So, but anyway, kind of to backtrack a little bit, we kind of I look at these. If you look at the types of alerts that are sent to the public, if you think of it like a pyramid, where at the bottom of the pyramid, it's larger, and then at the top of the pyramid it gets smaller. So at the bottom of the pyramid, your least impactful, but the most commonly sent alerts are typically the ones that you send just to your opt-ins through a local system that you maintain, or a internal system that you're maintaining for a defined audience, and it's typically alerts that are not necessarily life-threatening. It's simply like informational, and you do that maybe a couple times a day, depending on the size of your jurisdiction, maybe once or twice a week, or maybe like once a month or something like that. But you're sending these alerts out the most frequent, but it's to smaller groups of people. And then you kind of move up the pyramid a little bit. You might start including, as we mentioned, like the ability to dial phones. Typically these are landline or home phones. It nowadays does include voice over IP phones, so that's something new for you, Ian. I don't think we did that back in the day, but as most people transition away from a home phone or a landline phone and just use cell phones, a lot of people still do also now use maybe like an internet-based phone. So those numbers we do now have kind of access to, and that's kind of like the next step up, right? You have a message you want to get out to a larger audience, but still fairly locally contained to specific areas within your jurisdiction, or to a specific component within your company. And you're going to, instead of just emailing and texting them, now you're going to actually call a phone to kind of get their attention for some particular message. And then kind of just scooting up the scale even further, you get into the wireless emergency alerts, or the iPAWS system, where you're hitting an audience that has certainly not opted in, and because everybody in the world has a cell phone today, you're going to hit a very large majority of people that are going to be targeted by that particular alert. So it kind of moves up in scale. So on a daily basis, you're probably sending stuff just by email and text to a bunch of folks that opted into your system about something that's more informational than not. So but it gets them into your system, and it kind of gets them in the mode of receiving information from you as an entity. So they're comfortable with it, they're used to it, that kind of thing. The other component I didn't mention is using other tools, or using your tool to get to other platforms where people get information. Today's world is heavy on social media, right? So the ability to post things to Twitter, to Facebook, to Instagram. There's been a lot of talk about trying to figure out creative ways to get information out through TikTok or Snapchat. There was efforts there at one time, using things like accessing people through WhatsApp, Microsoft Teams, Google Chat, you name it, like where people are on a daily basis, whatever they're doing. There's been lots of work to try to figure out ways to access them that way, so that they see it, so that they get the information efficiently. And then traditional news still exists, right? So believe it or not, people do still have some TV, maybe either traditional cable, or they still listen to old school radio, FM radio, maybe in their car when they're commuting to work, especially in this area when you're commuting for 8 years. And so you kind of develop relationships, and you have the ability to promote messaging through the traditional news sources too. All those things are important when you're trying to convey information to the public. And the more severe the message, the more important it is for the public to see and hear the message, the more important it is to access as many of these pathways as possible with one single kind of consistent message. And there's a whole lot we could go into about how you design the message to be consistent, and making sure that you've communicated with a bunch of internal people to make sure that everybody's on the same page and the same message is going out to the public, because that's a challenge for a lot of folks, especially the larger organizations. But there's a lot to trying to ensure consistency of a message that goes out. So it's like like the little, when we were kids, the little pyramid that showed what you're supposed to eat. Right, to be healthy,
17 servings of grains a day.
Right. Whatever industry paid the federal government more money to get put on the pyramid. It's a
Drink
similar
your corn
concept.
syrup and shut up.
Right. It's healthy. Same kind of concept. So, at least I look at it that way, as this little pyramid concept, and how often you use each component, and the reach of that component. So. So that's kind of the how around it. Now, if I ask you, Ian, just to guess on a traditional, I'm a county, Pauls County, in the United States somewhere. If I create, Central City. If I create we should do that. We should create a public alert and warning system for Central City. I'm surprised that's never happened. That you heard that here, so the copyright, we need to trademark that. If Central City had a public alerting system called Central City Alerts, and if you were to guess, how many people do you think on average as a percentage that lived in Central City would sign up for it?
4%.
Yeah, not a bad guess. Yeah, I think the national average sits around 7%. So that scales with your population, but no matter how many people you got in your jurisdiction, 1 million to 10,000, if you create a alerting system, and you brand it and you promote it and you send out links for people to sign up for it, about 7% of your population most likely would sign up for it. Now, understanding it depends on how you look at your population, right? If you want to look at it by household, typically, not just by people. So you have an accurate kind of accounting of who's signing up that could in your jurisdiction. But in general, it sucks, right? I mean, to put it bluntly, the public typically isn't going to really be energized to go sign up for an alert system in your area. And so we use these other mechanisms of social media and traditional news, but also the opt-out systems, to ensure that when something really bad is happening, we still can reach the majority of the public in some way. And the hope is, I think, too, as you reach people, that they start spreading the message for you, especially on social media, to try and help promote or permeate the message throughout your your population, so that it kind of grows a little bit, because people, just in general, aren't going to go out and seek it. Typically, they're not going to go out and seek just signing up for an alert system unless you've told them about it and promote it. Right? They're not. Most people don't even know about this. They certainly don't know how it works and the differences between you sending a traditional message versus why their phone is making this crazy tone, and they never signed up for something and they want out of it. There's a whole big difference between how that is perceived in the public versus somebody that is dealing with it on a daily basis and knows how it works, perceives it. So they're not going to be perceived the same way. But yeah, it sucks. The opt-in rates are terrible. Hence why the iPAWS system is opt-out and not an opt-in system.
Yeah, and so from an emergency management perspective, I know that a lot of the EM people have heard this, but for those that maybe are emergency management adjacent, the concept of one message, many voices, so in this case, we're talking about electronics. So the concept of one message, many voices in emergency management means that theoretically, the locals or the people who are responsible for an incident or an emergency will create a message, and then the state will amplify it, and the feds can amplify it. And the other part of this is what you had brought up earlier. I think you had kind of gone around the edges of the fact that some people have only home phones. Some people only watch Twitter and social media. Some people listen to the radio. So the point is that when these emergencies happen, you'll have these software systems activated that can send out the wireless emergency alerts. They can call, home phones. But then you also have public information officers on the back end working in an organizational structure who are also getting it out on Twitter, getting it out on Facebook. So they're totally trying to saturate the message across the to the people that are affected, so that at some point, if you don't know about it, it's because you have your head stuck in the ground, or you live in a bunker and you're not paying attention, that's a possibility too. Some people don't want any of this information, and I'm starting to not blame them. But yeah, so just to kind of reemphasize or kind of double back on what you were saying, is that's the general concept. Is when something significant happens, we're trying to send it out through as many different avenues and as many different senders as possible to hit the maximum amount of people. So your 7%. In that case, it wouldn't be 7% that got the message. I don't know what the number would be, but it would be way, way higher because it's going across so many different avenues.
Right, exactly. And yeah, there's, you brought up the public information officers or PIOs, and that function exists in every locality, but also in most, if not every company, private entity that exists, right? There's if somebody is supposed to kind of be in charge of what a good message looks like going out to the public, and making sure they craft a message that is going to be useful to the public, using their training on what it is to communicate in general. So that in concept should happen, and it should happen every time that you're going to communicate with the public. Unfortunately, I think in a lot of cases, I don't think anybody who's in the field would disagree, there's a huge challenge with ensuring that there is a consistent kind of communication between the entity that decides a message should go out and the entity in the PIOs that typically is the one that communicates to the public. Because a lot of times, especially when it comes to the public alert and warning system, or even iPAWS and accessing iPAWS and the really significant systems, it's typically not a PIO that is going to be the one that's actually going to be typing out the message on the alert system and hitting the send button. It's usually somebody in a public safety or emergency management office that's doing that. And so, in a perfect world, there should be this really harmony of PIOs and public safety officials that work together to make the message go out, in the best way it could. In a lot of cases, there isn't that occurring, and you might have the PIO accessing social media because that's what they do on a daily basis, pushing out a message, and then you have somebody that's in the emergency management office clicking send on a email and text message to the public, and they're not exactly the same, or they conflict in some cases in the worst case scenario. But a lot of times it might be just, I've seen this a lot with a missing person. I'll use that as an example. We have a missing person, PD say is working a missing person case, and they call And in the Fairfax system, it was they call the emergency management office to send out a notification about the missing person. Um, but at the same time, there's a PIO or PIOs that work within the police department who are not really affiliated or communicating with the police officer who's requesting an alert to go out, that are also like putting together a missing person poster, and they're doing some things that are related to trying to communicate about a missing person as well, just not on the alerting platform. They're doing it in other spaces. And an alert would go out for a missing person, and it would include certain pieces of information. And then a Twitter post would go out about a missing person, and it would have way more information. It would have a picture, it would have a better description, it might actually have like a lot more detail on where they were last seen and where they might have been heading. And it's kind of like how did that happen, right? Like, it would be great to get that exact same message out across both pathways, but it didn't occur that way. The message went out, and it went out far and wide, but it wasn't maybe as succinct as it could have been. And I think a lot of times that happens, and it's a relationship issue, or it's relationship issues. It's misunderstanding of who has the responsibilities to do which components. It's just lack of practicing that, working together kind of concept. So that's I think we're kind of talking about challenges, and that's a big one. In my opinion, that's a huge one, is that consistency of message across the different divisions.
Yeah, so there's one of the things, and I say this as somebody who's super judgy about anything I get from the government in general, but there needs to be some realization from the public that, like, look, this, how do I effectively communicate this? They need to get over themselves and realize, like, hey, this is not a normal everyday message. Like, this was sent in a hurry for a reason. So suck it up, and move on with your life. Either it gave you useful information or it didn't. But they're just trying. And this is, again, giving the public, of which I'm part, giving the public way too much credit for their ability to be flexible and understanding. But at the same time, it does get, having answered some of those technical support emails for about 5 or 6 years. Or customer service emails, I should call them. It's just absurd, the things that people demand and or expect. And, honestly, if the public was more tuned into what's going on, we wouldn't have to worry about all these avenues and trying to get them out, the way that we do in order to try to make an impact. But, I saw a thing on, I guess there's a movie on Netflix that's got Gerard Butler in it where there's a meteor. Have you seen this, trailer?
Is that I think I've seen that movie. Is it Greenland? Is that what that? I think it's
something
Greenland.
There's so I saw a very small clip of it, but there's a clip where I guess he works for the Secret Service or something, but he gets a presidential alert on his phone that says, like, report to this bunker,
right?
And the first thing I thought of was I was like, I wonder if they'd use him that way, you know what I mean? Like the presidential alert thing, and I'm like, I'm sure, that all political donors would get that message telling them to get to a bunker, while the rest of us were, wondered what the hell was going on.
Right.
I just thought of that. I need to watch that movie at some point.
It was a good movie. I always think to myself, like, would we be that capable? Like, knowing how things work on the back end, like, I wonder to myself, like, would we actually be able to do that? Probably not, right? Yeah,
every time I see something in a movie where, not just emergency management, but like military emergency management, that something works in a movie, and I'm like, oh, that's impressive. I wonder if that. No, it can't. Yeah, dumb it down by like 100%.
They give you way too much credit.
Yeah, that's So you have to take all the wow out of it and go, yeah, they probably fumbled through this, but still got it to work. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
It's the same. Not to get too far off topic, but like the UFO conspiracies. Like, anybody who's ever been adjacent to a fire station can tell you the government is not keeping secrets.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, the people in the government are incapable of. I mean, I find the stuff interesting. Like, I love the conspiracies.
I love it too, but I'm the same way. Yeah.
But my common sense tells me, like, there's people like me who are working. You're telling me there's people like me working in a room with like little green men bodies. Like,
yeah, no.
I would be telling everyone I know.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so would most other people. But sorry.
Yeah, we give it too much credit. We give the government too much credit of what they're capable of. I think it's, in general, the public does that a lot.
When things are good and bad. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So when things work, we give the government too much credit, and when things don't work, we blame the government too much.
Right.
As if the government can just stick their massive hand in and go, we're not going to do this anymore, and it just magically goes away. Yeah.
That's good. That's a good point, actually. Let's look at it both ways. Yeah. So yeah, you kind of hit on it, like the lack of public understanding of how this stuff works and why they get certain messages at some times and different ones at others. It contributes to some of these issues of maybe not communicating as clearly or as well to them. Um, the there are a couple of other ones real quick. There are character limitations on the FEMA iPAWS system, so you can only send so many characters through the message, and that's related to the way the technology was built. And they constantly are trying to improve, the iPAWS system. And I say iPAWS, and then I say WIA because, like NIMS and ICS, right? There's iPAWS, and then there are components within iPAWS, and the wireless emergency alert system is only one of those components. It's probably the most commonly used one today, but there are others. The traditional EAS system, which most people of our generation probably remember, but a lot of the younger ones don't necessarily, which is the old school TV takeover and the radio system takeover. If it's not a coincidence, if you actually think about this, that the WIA alert that you get on your phone has the same crazy tone that you would hear if your TV was using an EAS message or the radio system was before it broadcasted an EAS message, because they're the same system, so hence the same tone. It's funny that I feel like most people don't make that connection, but the public in general doesn't seem to. So there are other components of the system. I kind of glazed over those, but they are still in play as well. And if you have access to WIA, typically you have access to the EAS system as well. And there's others too that exist in that space. But in the interest of time, we'll kind of kick it forward and stick on this challenges thing. So public understanding, there's infrastructure that can be compromised. Like you lose cell towers in a particular area because of an event like a hurricane, which affects negatively your ability to communicate with the public in a lot of ways. And so having plans in place for how would you get a message out if you lost your ability to communicate over your traditional pathways like cell phones or television or the radio system, or what do you do in those cases? And there have been instances where that certainly has occurred. The derecho, at least for us in Virginia in 2012, is a good example of a significant compromise of infrastructure and having to get creative with how the message gets out to the public, or at least attempting to get the message out to the public, because I wouldn't even say we really got the message out that well to the public during that event, just based on how bad it was impacting cell phone infrastructure. So
yeah, for that event, I mean, I worked for emergency management. I had no idea what was happening.
Yeah.
Because the absence of messages isn't the big. I think that was like a Saturday morning.
Yep.
And so the storm had come through
that Friday night.
Yeah, Friday night, and so I can't remember how I ended up getting it, but it was like a mix of emails. I think it came through from my Wi-Fi. That's the only reason where I actually got the email, because it came from my Wi-Fi. So I happened to be on my computer and saw an email. And I was like, everything's down.
Yeah.
And so obviously we all went into work. We had another situation back in like 03, 04 when I was a police and fire dispatcher, where I don't remember the specifics, but we lost literally everything for 3 or 4 hours. Like the 911 system was down, the radio system was down, and so you think there's a playbook for that? Not at the time. There was nothing. So it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. We were just scrambling. So we were calling landline to the different fire stations and police stations, saying we were just posting them up at intersections.
Yeah.
It's like, turn on your lights, be visible. We don't have no idea how to deal with this. We're trying to figure it out, So that way, if somebody has an emergency, they can step outside and hopefully see lights. Somewhere, But everything was down. Kind of a sidebar, but yeah, these things can and it will happen again.
Yeah.
Depending on these storms or the space weather, which is my is my favorite category.
Yeah, that
was a recent thing.
Interesting one. Yeah, that's definitely always an interesting one. But yeah, that was a crazy event, and it's something that you don't want to often think about, or you don't often think about, is what if you didn't have this infrastructure? How would you address that? And so that's something that's definitely a challenge to any of these types of systems, because they're going to rely at some point on a piece of infrastructure along the way. The training of senders is a huge one. Just the ability for a sender to write a good message is a big one. I'd say twofold, actually: to write a good message and to understand when and when not to send it. And to further down how they should send it, like to which pathways. But training is a huge one, and because especially when you get up to the WIA level, where you're sending these messages maybe once or twice a year or less, maybe you only do it at one time ever in your career, obviously you're lacking experience on it, so the need to practice those is extremely important. And a lot of places just don't. They don't think about it, or it's not a priority for them until it is, right? Like typically, it's not a priority. And you don't think about it until it is a priority, and you realize, oh crap, I have no idea what the heck I'm doing here. And now you're calling around, panicked, trying to figure out how to access the WIA system or send a message out through it, which is not a good place to be. Um, and then language. So there's a big one that's come up a long time. For a long time, this has been a component of NIMS forever. Common language, plain language, the ability to communicate with the public needs to be at a very basic reading level.
Fifth grade level, fourth grade level.
Yeah, I think it's like fifth grade level. I think it's actually maybe even lower than that. It needs to be clear. You need to state what's happening. Like, you cannot use acronyms. People don't understand public safety lingo. They don't understand. You can always tell if it was a dispatcher that sent out an emergency alert, because they just can't get themselves out of using abbreviations and lingo, because they do it so often. It's like a part of their world, right? So whenever you see a message that's like filled with these like abbreviations or acronyms, I'm like, that had to have been a dispatcher that sent that. But avoiding that is important, and trying to do it in a manner that still meets the character limit requirements is very difficult in some cases. So there are a lot of tools that that are out there that help put that together in a way that makes sense, and help you craft these messages so they fit in those character limits on the WIA system, and on even some of your other, like Twitter has obviously a character limit too, and if you're posting to these other places, you're going to run into these different message size errors that you need to work through. So where does that leave us? I think trying to get to the end of this conversation, I realize, as we sit here at this point in the podcast, like there is a lot to talk about when it comes to public alert and warning, and we barely scratched the surface in this conversation. We were like at a super high level with this topic, but there are some things that are coming. I wanted to mention, or things that are like new to the space that you'll start seeing, I think, adopted pretty significantly across the space, that will change, I think, for the better, the messages that are sent out and the efficiency that they are sent out. And I'll give a few plugs for things I can plug that are kind of public out there. The first is the Warn Room, which is a website. If you just Google Warn Room, that is a public website. It's managed by Dr. Jeanette Sutton, who is from the University of Albany. Which is, I think, it's so ironic to me, because it's funny to me that like there's this huge, very active, research group out of the University of Albany, led by Dr. Sutton, on public alert and warning, and I'm from Albany, right? So like, it's just like it's like literally in the backyard of where I grew up, which is just sometimes the small world thing. So they're doing a ton of work on studying. They're really carrying forward a lot of work from another, Dr. Dennis Milletti, who was another researcher in the space of how to write effective alerts. So how to write an alert that people will understand and take action on. The biggest thing was leading them to action, and so that they don't just read it and delete it or just ignore it, but they actually take action on it. And they've developed a tool. They're developing tools, but they've developed a tool called the Message Design Dashboard, or the MDD as we're calling it now in the space. And that tool is a free website that I think FEMA now is like in charge of. FEMA, I think, actually sponsored the development of it. It literally is just a website that kind of walks you through building a effective message within the character limits of WIA, and it also ensures that it includes key components of information, so that as research has proven, if people see that information, they'll take action. They'll do something with it. So really cool tool. It's very simple to use. I've used it a few times. I've was fortunate enough to take some training on early access for it, and I don't like plugging things a lot of times on the podcast specifically, because well, we don't get paid for it. So, but but for this particular one, it's a good cause. So I would certainly encourage folks to take a look at that if you haven't heard of it or you have no idea what I'm talking about. Go out there and look at some of that stuff, especially if you're in the public alert and warning space. The other ones that's kind of making, I think, will make a big contribution is AI. So I'd be curious on your thoughts on this, Ian, because I think
I'm an AI dabbler. So,
yeah, AI is interesting, right? And it's touching everything we deal with across the globe at this point. But there has been a lot of effort. I've seen a lot of effort being applied to trying to leverage AI to create messages for people. Not only to create like a message, but also to translate said message into whatever languages you want it to send in a way that it actually makes sense. Unlike some cases, if you use like Google Translate today or something like that, you'll find that it's very literal in its translation, and so sometimes it doesn't make sense to a native speaker of that language. So AI, obviously has more promise there because it is based on learning models and it can potentially translate it in a way understanding more of a native tone than just literal translation.
It doesn't just translate word for word in the meaning; it translates the context, which a lot of times can come out with drastically different words and how phrases are said when you translate them across languages.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So lots to be excited about there. There's a couple of I've seen a few folks that I think I follow on Twitter or on LinkedIn that have been dabbling in AI and have created some models, I guess, of their own for this particular purpose for messaging. But I do expect that you'll see like a huge proliferation, of AI in this space in the next couple of years. I think it's like right there on the cusp as it is. I think it's going to be kind of a standard thing in a few more years. So.
Yeah, based on what you were just saying, as you were talking through that before you even mentioned AI, when you were talking about the University of Albany, first thing that went to my head was like, well, I could just go to ChatGPT, type in the message I want to send, and then say apply University of Albany's emergency messaging standard, and it would do it. Yeah. It would read Albany stuff, and it would compile it into one message. I mean, I think ChatGPT specifically got a bad rap a couple of years ago when it really first launched.
Yeah.
And people and it was, oh, well, it's going to give you, it doesn't know context and it can't do this and it can't do that. I'm telling you, like, I use it for a variety of stuff and I'm just blown away.
Yeah.
By, a recent thing came up and I'm probably giving away secrets, but I can, like, we did we're going to venture off into AI now, but we did a strategic planning session for the incident management team, and so we had a list of things that people thought were themes or complaints, things that we do well, whatever.
Yeah.
I literally put them into a table, good, bad, whatever, and pasted them into ChatGPT and said, this is the feedback from a strategic plan, please create themes, do this, do that. Boom, and it just dumped them out for me.
It's crazy.
And I went back through and I read it like 10 times, and I'm like, If I had worked on this for 6 or 8 hours, I probably would have come to this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have worked on it for 6 or 8 hours.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
So it came out with a better product than something that I could have done internally. And so to me, when it's something, I look at it like that. If I'm going to use an AI solution, I don't want it to. I'm not going to ask it to do something that I can't do.
Right.
Or that I'm not capable of doing. What I'm going to ask it to do is save me freaking 4 hours. And just give me compile all this stuff, give me results, or create graphs. You know what I mean? Like, here's this, create a, pivot table for blah, 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 blah. And it'll dump out. I mean, it's like I said, if people are sleeping on it and haven't played with it at least a little bit to see some of the stuff it can do, you're hurting yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. You should definitely get into that space, at least play with that space a little bit and understand what's happening and how it's doing it and what it can do for you. Because I agree with you. I think the sweet spot with AI today, at least, is definitely to use it for things you do know. But to save you just the legwork, because that way you can look at the result and understand the result, but you didn't have to put all that effort in up front, especially for busy work like that, in a lot of cases. It's just a time saver. I don't know if you've seen the new version of ChatGPT. Is it ChatGPT O? Which it has the voice prompts, right? So now you can just talk to it, and it kind of like a modern day Jarvis kind of thing, like or Cortana, it just it's a conversation now you're having with Chat GPT effectively, and then it's spitting out whatever you're asking it to do. So it's crazy to me how fast it's evolving, and where that space will be in 5 years is like the new horizon, right? Like it's the next big thing, but it's wild to me what it can do.
Yeah, when you start, if you start playing with it, you start thinking about all the people who are like, "Oh, AI is going to take jobs." Yes, yes, it is. It's
Yeah.
going to take a lot of jobs, and specifically emergency management. I can think of probably 5 or 6 different disciplines within emergency management that if ChatGPT, as it evolves, I'll just say this: in 5 years, I completely expect to be able to give ChatGPT some prompts and have it pump out an entire exercise with measles,
Yeah.
like with everything.
Yes.
Like that is going to happen, and that's not even a stretch right now.
Yeah.
Planning, like creating plans, is a little bit more complicated, but you could get it right now, to create a hazard-specific response plan where you just have to go in and update some language. You know what I mean? So you still follow the planning process. You still get all the input. You still get all the expertise from all the people in the room, but then have it craft the message according to that expertise.
Yeah.
Or craft the concept of operations, whatever you want to call it. So it's something. I mean, it's fascinating. And like I said, anybody who's not at least dabbling for day-to-day use to save you time is just out of your mind, because there's going to come a time in 5 or 10 years where if you don't know how to manipulate these AI systems to get them to do what you want, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
Like, quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, don't be left in the dust. So yeah, that's a huge, obviously, horizon for this, and it obviously applies to lots of things, but this space as well. And then the other cool thing I've seen is the ability they've been playing a lot. There's some companies that have been playing a lot with the ability to send alerts to your car infotainment system directly, right? So when you have like and this can be done a couple different ways, but effectively, if you have your car navigation system up or whatever, and you're driving along and there's some event that occurs, you could get a message that pops right up on your screen in your car. There's also some things I've seen where they have even like fire trucks coming up behind you. It pops up a pop-up on your screen to tell you like emergency vehicle approaching. So if you don't hear it, you still see like, hey, something I should take action on, which is pretty cool too. And that evolves, I think, in a lot of ways with just naturally with the way that space is going and technology, and how much your phone now kind of integrates into your car's infotainment system. It's kind of just a natural evolution to put messaging there too. But reaching people wherever they are and however you can get a hold of them is the goal, right? And as people stop listening to FM radio, and even satellite radio is kind of, I feel like, dying or dead, and they're just streaming from their phone that's connected to their car music or podcasts, then that's definitely a space you want to be able to reach them.
Can I go on a rant real quick?
Yeah. The floor is yours.
So do you remember satellite radio when it first came out?
Yeah.
Right? There was at the time it was Sirius and XM.
And XM.
But I remember like why would I do this? And it was like, oh well, you can pay $100 a year and there's no commercials.
Right.
Anybody listen to Sirius XM recently? Like, it's all commercials.
Yeah.
They basically said, no, now that we have all these subscriptions, let's add in the commercials so we can make more money. And so, like, the original intent behind that is now dead, and they're just raking in money. I don't know I don't know about their business models or how much money they're making, but I find it fascinating every time I think back to that.
I think they were dying. Like they never really garnered enough audience to like make it a profitable endeavor, and then so then they start going to traditional means of raising money,
Right.
like putting ads back in, even though you're paying. It's the same thing that's happening now with streaming service. Have you noticed this? Like Prime Video,
Yeah.
you pay for Prime, whatever, and they were like, oh, now you get Prime Video, cool too. It's free. Well, that's cool. And then like recently, it's like, oh yeah, now you get commercials every so many. Unless you upgrade your plan in Prime Video, you get commercials, right? It's like what?
Right.
What the hell? Like.
Yeah, and Disney's the same way. I mean, with Shane around, his new thing is watching Iguana 20 times a day, which in Shane talk is Moana. So he wants to watch Iguana all the time. But we have like the $7, $8 plan or whatever, and it's so we get the commercials for stuff that has nothing to do with anything Shane would like.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just it's fascinating to me that model, because I just going on a rant. I just don't understand how the entire, and I knew it as soon. not that I'm a businessman necessarily, but I remember when they first started this whole thing, the big deal was Howard Stern. Howard Stern was
Yes.
going to come over to XM or Sirius, whichever
Yep.
one it was, and he had like $100 million package, and I'm sitting here going like, they're never going to pay for that just by these
Nope.
these subscriptions. So it's whatever. The consumer got played yet again.
Yeah, it's just very typical. Yeah, so, and I guess maybe someday this podcast will have commercials. We'll put commercial breaks in it. We'll follow.
I can tell you if we have commercials and we're making money, there's going to be a lot more podcasts.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, yes. I was gonna say the last thing I was just gonna talk about real quick is there at least has been some talk about message standards, like messaging standards as far as enforcing. It's interesting to me that really, at least from a federal standpoint, they love creating and enforcing standards, and there really hasn't been
that they don't follow.
Right, an enforced standard on like messaging, especially if using their system, right, like the WIA system or iPAWS in general. Like there are some like required things that have to be a part of the message, but there isn't really any kind of standard necessarily on the way the message is crafted, the format of the message. And there's lots of guidance on how it should be crafted, but there really isn't like this is thou shalt do this if you're going to use the system, which has always been interesting to me. But I do think that could be something that's in play at some point in the future too. I think they've been moving slowly in that direction for a long time, and as more and more people send crazy messages out to thousands of people that they shouldn't have probably, then I think you're going to start seeing the standards conversation come up again. But yeah, it's one space where it's it's not very federal-like, I guess, in a lot of ways. So,
well, if it's anything like the rest of emergency management, then the feds will say, "Oh, you guys have to do this. You should do this. This is how you should do it. This is the only right way to do it." And then when you start looking at their stuff, it's like, how come you guys aren't doing any of the things that you said we should do?
You got to use your own, example here. You got to set.
Well, we're different. We're different.
Right.
What we do can't be it's not the same thing, and whatever.
Yes. I think I remember hearing the exact thing from them in the training class
dude.
with that.
Yeah, dude, I can go on, and when I talk to the people from FEMA, they laugh at it too.
Yeah,
they're like, "Oh yeah, it's absurd. I don't know why we can't practice what we preach." But
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, that's FEMA. It's federal government. Like I said, too much credit given. A lot of times, way too much credit given. So, but yeah, anything else you wanted to bring up on this topic? Because I think we've gone long on this particular one a little bit.
No, I've been fighting the urge for an hour and 11 minutes to start singing BBL Drizzy, so you're welcome. but I did not do that.
Google that if anyone's interested in the.
I think I may make it the opening music. We'll see.
Oh, that'd be freaking perfect! I forgot that beat's just available. You can use it. It's like there's so many. I don't think people realize there are so many songs that we would love to use as like the intro or outro to this podcast that we just can't because we get in trouble. So, not like a copyright. The copyright, it's annoying to me because there's so many good ones that we could use, but it's just
and not that I expect anybody listening will have been following this, but that was one of the things that was so cool about when Kendrick Lamar just completely roasted Drake over the past month and a half or so. Is everything Kendrick put out was copyright free. So anybody who uses
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have all these people on YouTube who are reacting to these songs or using them and they're making money off of it. And he did that for that reason.
Oh,
so he removed all the copyrights on everything he released so that it could be reproduced. So unlike the other half of that feud, who was sending cease and desist messages furiously.
Right. So, right. I did not hear that part of it, but yeah, that BBL Drizzy beat is.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do that.
It gets in your brain and you can't get it out.
Yep, exactly. Did you know the original version of that song was AI created?
No, I did not know that.
Oh, you didn't know that? Okay, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, sorry, this is at the end, and I'm sure most people stopped listening by now, so we're just talking to each other. Is that the one hip hop artist and one Canadian, Kendrick Lamar and Drake, got into a verbal altercation really over the past 10 years, but it kind of came to a head over the past month and a half. Kendrick Lamar and a bunch of other people were like attacking Drake for a variety of reasons. But one producer named Metro Boomin released a song called BBL Drizzy, making fun of the fact that Drake has reportedly had numerous Brazilian butt lift surgeries. So that's what BBL is, and Drizzy is Drake's nickname. Well, the sample in it, and again, I'm going to try to include it either in the ending or the opening to this, the sample in it was actually based on a real song called BBL Drizzy, which is like a 70s soul song, like a R&B
Okay.
song, and it was created using AI by a comedian. He calls himself, or he calls the character who sang that song, King Wallonius. So if you go look for King Wallonius, you'll find the actual 70s R&B version of that.
Oh, no kidding.
And then so Metro Boomin took it and did what I call like the chipmunk soul. Like
Yeah.
made the sample where it's like spun up and faster and
Right,
you know
right.
higher pitched. And so yeah, I didn't know if you knew that, Paul. So
I did not, no.
I thought it was fascinating because when I first went looking for that song, I was running into the original. And I was like, what is
Right.
this?
Oh,
Why
that's
am I
cool.
hearing it? But yeah, he dumped it all into an AI generator and said, create a, basically he created a character, created the pictures of the character, created the music, everything through AI.
That's crazy.
And all he did was write the lyrics.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, and then all of a sudden he's got an imaginary character singing these, what sounds like, I can't remember the guy's name. It reminded me of a specific singer from the 1970s when I first heard it. But
Okay.
yeah, it's fascinating that AI
AI,
is able to do all this stuff. So it
That's
reminded
crazy.
me the movie iRobot.
Oh,
which
yeah.
was,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Will Smith, where he asks he asked the robot, and he was like, "Is a robot capable of creating a work of art?" And the robot looks at him, and goes, "Are you?" So anyways, I'll shut up now.
All right, well that's it. If you're still here with us, God love you. 'Cause
God bless
we
you.
went a little bit over on this one, but yeah. Until next time, we'll have to see. I think we do have a topic already kind of lined up for the next episode. So hopefully, maybe we'll this time of year gets tough for us syncing up and getting these episodes out, just because we got so much going on, and summertime, I think especially too, it gets a little trickier, but. Since Ian has a nice pool, and I don't, maybe we'll record poolside an episode for the next one or something like that. But
As long
anyway,
as there's drinks.
yeah. So if you don't forget, just a quick reminder: keep on supporting us. If you downloading the podcast, you can download the podcast, actually the audio version of this podcast, anywhere you can get podcasts. So we have about a 50-50 split, I think, nowadays, right now, between those that watch us on YouTube at Surviving Central City and those that watch us or download us directly from their podcast app. So if you want to see our ugly faces, definitely check out the YouTube channel. But you don't have to. If you want to listen to us in the car or something like that, you could still download us as an audio podcast as well. At Surviving CC on Twitter, survivingcentralcity@gmail.com. If you want to reach out to us, give us topic ideas. We always love that. Correct us on something we said that you think is wrong, even though it wasn't wrong, because everything we say is 100% accurate and the truth. Or if you just want to give us some feedback and praise, we love that too. So definitely hit us up or reach out to us. We always love that kind of stuff.
Yep, I am motivated solely by your people's praise. So with
Yeah.
that, go ahead, Paul, close it out.
All right, my survivors, stay classy and keep on surviving.